Welcome, everyone. What's up? We're discussing solutions here on Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. Every Thursday, we get together with my audience on Discord. I'll share the link in the voice chat, but you can also find that link in the description. So far what we've been discussing is like how we can inform more people and organize with your community so you can raise consciousness, opt out of the system, be less dependent on corporations, try to find ways that we can, fight the system without relying on electoral politics and without relying solely on direct action. Direct action is good, but we can't solely be doing that because then we run into the problem of just having protest after protest after protest, but then our voices aren't getting fully heard enough. We got to find other ways to raise consciousness, and some things that we've discussed on this show is writing out pamphlets. We've discussed what information to put in those pamphlets, how these will vary community by community. But what's important also is how you deliver your message and how aware you are of yourself and how you're delivering that message to people. So one thing that I think we can focus today, this is something we were just discussing before we went live, is self-care. We were talking about shadow work. We were talking about some of the topics that people like Gabor Mate have discussed. Taking care of yourself. If you take care of yourself, if you're fully aware of yourself, then you're more able to understand other people as well and how you can communicate with them. So does anybody want to expand a little bit more on that? Like we were discussing shadow work and all that. Does anybody want to explain what that really is? Have at it, anyone. Prop. Yeah, red economics.
Basically, shadow work is the things that it's your subconscious and it's the dark parts of yourself that you don't want to look at. So it's like, I mean, there's certain aspects of yourself that you can recognize and see, but the shadow is the stuff that, like, your subconscious thinks it's too much for you to consciously deal with. So that's when the shadow work is the really, like, nasty kind of work that nobody wants to do, but it's super important to know about because uh, that's how people can control other people is through their shadows and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, if I,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Um, I think one way people can also think about it if they don't know so much about like stuff going on in the spiritual side, it kind of manifests in so many ways like alcoholism, just getting into toxic relationships over and over and over again, um, just constant negative behavior that you can't necessarily get out of, and that's going to take having to the darkest, most unwelcome, most unloved parts of you. And a lot of people probably don't want to do that because you have to look at like the really negative parts of yourself, of your life, your family, and yeah.
It's uncomfortable. Like these are parts of yourself that you're trying to repress and you're trying to deny that they're not there. And sometimes we lash out on other people who express those parts of ourselves that we don't like. This is something that Jimmy Dores discussed on his show too. But it's like Carl Jung, who was discussing this concept of the shadow, right? And there's studies that have been done on people that show that how this is true. Like there's people that they have parts of themselves that are homosexual, and then they try to repress that, and then there's been psychologists that have looked at people. They've given them like photos of like naked people of the same sex, and the people that are most homophobic are the ones that would get most aroused by pictures of naked people of the same sex. It's because there's that part of themselves that they're trying so hard to repress. Right? You guys have heard of that
Yeah.
stuff, right?
Oh yeah. And the shadow can also include good stuff too, good qualities that maybe that because of like childhood trauma or something that you've repressed as like a just out of survival. Don't be too smart, don't be too, caring, don't, so a lot of good qualities end up in the shadow as well.
Mm. Yeah, definitely, definitely. Anyone else want to add anything on?
Yeah, you can kind of think of it like in scientific terms too. There's also like studies that um, prove that like you know it's kind of obvious. The better you like treat yourself, the better your life is, the better your mood is, and everything. Um, there's like hormones in our brain called like cortisol, stuff like that. That if it's like not regulated in the right ways, it can like lead to like almost like an addiction to stress in some ways. And some people are seeking out like confrontation that has like no resolution. And
Hmm.
yeah, it could be from uh, like childhood trauma. Most things are stemming from like your youth or even your development in like utero. And I think that in like activism, people should like be looking at how they like treat themselves and how they, I guess, treat others and how they think about like morality and ethics and stuff in their politics.
This is not stuff that's taught to us in school, but I think it's really important, and it should be taught to people at a really young age, how to handle social situations, how to handle themselves, how to be in better control of their emotions, that they don't react impulsively and do something that they'll regret. I mean, there's people that study this stuff, so I mean, I don't understand why it's not taught in schools to try to raise people's consciousness so we can have a more intelligent society. I mean, emotional intelligence is really really important. Like
It's a pretty key point, Franco.
yeah.
Well, I feel like you probably don't teach this in school, probably because people who do shadow work usually are a lot more self-aware of themselves and the people around them, so they're probably not as easy to control and kind of fit
Exactly.
into the
So they
society
want
into it.
obedient workers, huh?
Yeah.
That's why
Can't
the bells
hold the
ring.
credit
It's
that way.
it's why the bells ring like every hour or so when you switch classes. It's so we're preparing people for factory work.
And
Okay.
if you do the shadow work, you can't sell them, a prescription for depression medication.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
you pretty much handled what the big pharma wants to sell you. You've been able to handle it and process it on your own.
Yeah, that's so true. They want us to be so reliant on corporations to solve all our problems, so that we can keep dumping our money onto them. But yeah, like why work on yourself, through, talking with people in your community, like having discussions like how we do, like how you guys do, like in the Yelbro Discord, the Yellow Brick Road Discord, where there's people who are dealing with stuff, and then they like let it out, and then as a community, everyone's like talking to them, to trying to make them more self-aware of themselves. Um, yeah, what do you guys think of that?
I think it's awesome. I think a lot of it is just making it for like this key point that we live in a profoundly sick society, and that there's a great quote about this that it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. I think that's just what we have, and so like being able to do that and like vent, and it's a little bit of it's doing some shadow work because you'll maybe discover something about yourself that you didn't actually know or even think could have been an issue, and so I think it's pretty helpful. But you're right. I think it'd be nice to see a lot more of that.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it too is just learning coping skills or healthy ways of dealing with stuff instead of like getting angry and blowing up and, hitting something or somebody or cussing somebody out. It's like, okay, well, I can deep breath and use my words kind of stuff.
And we'll make some Dawn copters.
All else fails.
I guess, yeah. So what we have on the screen here is Dr. Gabor Mate talking about trauma and how that restricts the authentic self. This was This was recommended to me by Propaganda. Shout out to you. But all of us have some kind of trauma, right? And if we don't have that resolved, then we can't be our true self. If we can't help clean other people's houses if we don't have our own house cleaned. So I'm just gonna play a little bit of this and we can comment on it.
As a family physician, you get to see people before they get sick. So you know what their personalities are like for years before they get sick. And also you get to see them in the context of their families, including their multi-generational family of origin. By the way, just as an interesting exercise, let me just ask you right now, I'm not going to ask you any personal details, but how many of you in the last 5 years have been to a respirologist, a gastroenterologist, a cardiologist, a neurologist, a gastroenterologist, a dermatologist, maybe a rheumatologist, any kind of an ologist? Just put your hand up. Okay. Now, put your hand up again if they asked you about childhood trauma. One person, that's great. If they asked you about stresses in your relationship with your spouse, couple of hands. About job stress. Yeah, so we have maybe like a 5 to 10%, and that's really good if they ask you about it. I wonder how long they took the discussion, but it doesn't even occur to them. But I'm telling you, all of you who went to these specialists were there because of trauma. Virtually all of you. Now, there are diseases that you can't put into that category. There are genetic diseases, like this one that runs in my family, muscular dystrophy. If you have the gene, you'll have the disease. It's nothing to do with life or stress. It's just, although that can affect the course of it, but whether you get it or not is simply genetic. Those diseases are extraordinarily rare. Like 1 in 10,000 of the population will have a disease like that. Most diseases have little or nothing to do with genetic factors. So these are then the patterns that I noticed in my clients. And by the way, when I said childhood trauma, probably some of you are at least internally shaking your heads because you're looking at your life, and I never had any trauma. But I'll knock that out of you in a half an hour or so. As a matter of fact, I conducted what I call the Happy Childhood Challenge, which I'll tell you about more later. Because it all depends on how you do trauma. And trauma, for me, and that's a whole other lecture, but trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. And things can happen inside you for which you don't need very dramatic events. But trauma essentially is a restriction of your capacity. It's a limitation. It's a constriction in the body. It's a constriction in your mental capacity to respond in the present moment from your authentic self. Essentially, trauma is a restriction of your authentic self in the present moment. That's what trauma is. For which you don't need dramatic events.
So, I mean, I think it's admirable that there's a lot of people who want to, dive, headfirst into trying to solve our issues, or say, we need a revolution, or we need general strikes, or we need to organize a third party. But then they don't know how to handle an organization. They don't know how to deal with people. Yeah, and I mean, it's because a lot of us don't have, our traumas, our shadows in check. So what did you guys think about how there's people that want to dive into trying to solve our problems, trying to organize something big, like a big event, like a general strike or a third party, but they don't have these things in check, and then we see that organization or event or whatever, it collapses. Have you guys noticed that?
I think it's interesting to meet people that go like shadow ban, like the shit that happens constantly to you and I. Like, and again, I'm sure there's other people here that have been in a union or involved in a union. Shadow has much more experience than I have. He's actually dealing with that shit right now. And every time people come in and are like, we're gonna have a general strike, and like we're like, okay, what are the list of demands? You know, do you have a strike fund? Basic questions, you know, that you would think of if you were involved in that. And it's just like, it's nuts to me that people will want to advocate for actions like, because right now you got to look at Taft-Hartley and everything that essentially made not legal, and look at how that's done with everything, and understand that, you know, doing the kind of striking that they're talking about, they could get into the people losing not just their jobs, but thinking that they're covered, or and again, it just really depends on the situation. But it just floors me that it's like they've learned this stuff, and they think they can just run with what's in, you know, all of the books, you know what I'm saying, and they can run with that stuff, and that they don't actually have to talk to the actual workers. They just have to get people to do things, and that's just kind of the way it feels to me.
Like they're being
Oh, yeah, I love
textbook
their
robots.
Like, talk to workers and talk to people. Like, communication is the main thing here, and there's like a huge info war going on, where the media and the internet media that people consume is like atomizing people, and nobody has communication skills, and getting back to that is a key part of like organizing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I love that their heart's in the right place. Like I mean, they do want to change things, and I like that. You know, I mean, they really do want to, you know, make things better. But you know, that's a good start, but it's not going to be enough. Like, you have to have your heart in the right place and be smart about it. Know about all the laws and the rules. Cover all your bases. You know, be strategic about it. So I mean, like they got the first part down, but we got to do the other half too.
100%.
I think one of the biggest problems that we have is that there's such a focus on materialism, being that and historical materialism, I guess, as well. Is that people think that you can apply the same solutions of the past to a present problem, and I think the power of organized labor is greatly overstated, one. And two, I mean, people have kind of resigned themselves to following a playbook, and the playbook has not evolved with time, and has not evolved with new material conditions. And, I mean, people don't want to address the problem of bureaucracy, right? They think that, I shouldn't proverbialize they. Some people would like to live in a paradigm in which bureaucracy can somehow be maintained and managed for our own purposes. Somehow, like, you can take that tool and you can use it for good. But I think I think that history has shown us otherwise, right? And so, that being said, I think there needs to be a buildup on a municipal level, because what I need here is not the same as what someone needs in New York City. It's not the same as what somebody needs in the mountains of West Virginia. It's not what somebody needs in the fucking swamps of fucking Alabama. We have entirely different needs and different priorities. And at a very baseline, people need to be empowered at a municipal level. And this the overemphasis on national or international politics, electoralism, and policies, and all that baggage that's associated with it, you get lost in the sauce, and you just eventually will be abdicating any power that you have and giving it to someone at a higher level, because you have this hope that they're going to somehow make it better. And I think we need to reject that entirely. At a municipal level, people need to get with each other and figure out what are the concerns and needs that need to be addressed here, right? Like, the bureaucracy question has been thoroughly the bureaucracy question has been thoroughly tested and answered, and at this point, bureaucracy is another boot on our necks, and that includes organized labor. Being that I am in organized labor, I understand fully how the fucking chain of command works at the locals and at the regionals and at the districts and at the international level. The union will fuck you just as hard as the employers will. They might barter you a better deal, maybe, but at the end of the day, they are another boot upon your neck, and they are unaccountable. So municipal politics first.
What I'm also getting from this shadow ban is what you're pretty much saying is let's say like we're able to replace this government that's oppressing us right now, and we want a better one. But if we don't have ourselves in check, if we don't study ourselves, we don't study the mistakes of like our predecessors. What if we get this new government that we get becomes just as bad? Because people didn't have themselves in check, right?
It's not a question of what if; it's a question of when. People have this tendency to romanticize these revolutions and these governments and these organizations of the past, as if we have a spotlight on all the great things that happened as a result, and we disregard all the bad things that happened, and we disregard how those things transpired in that fashion, in that order, and in that manner led us to the issues that we're at today. We're not able to evolve as, because, we do not have our own houses in order. And people give Jordan Peterson a lot of shit, myself included, but you do have to clean your room. You do have to set your own house in order first. And each and every religion and philosophical way of living across the planet has this integral to it, like Jesus and shit. okay, bro. But each and every religion, like Jesus would say, pull the plank out of your own eye before you go picking the speck out of your brother's, right? And in the Tao, it says things along the same sort. And there's this recurring theme that we as broken people cannot fix the broken macrocosm without addressing the microcosm first.
Well said.
Yeah. Very well said. I have noticed, there's some groups of people, and I will say like there is like a lot of these people come from like a communist background, where there is like a lot of focus like on too much hyper focus on history and romanticizing on some groups that revolted against their previous oppressive government, and it's fine to look at history and learn from it, but you can't just stay too hyper focused on that you're ignoring what's happening now in the present and how things have to be different than what was done during those times. Very well said. Anybody else want to add anything on?
Because we're dealing with a surveillance state that we never had to deal with quite like this in the past. There was some spies or placing people in there to co-opt or to break up certain groups, but the surveillance state we live in now is totally unlike anything else we've ever been in before. So especially now, we have to be super careful.
Like if you start trying to plan like a some kind of like revolution or something, our intelligence is listening to us all over the place. You can gather people first for you're gonna scare some people away too if you're gonna be talking about some kind of violent revolution. Who's to say you can't gather more people if you talk to them about a peaceful one? you know, or you can just focus on opting out first, and then if like the state reacts violently like that, that's like why focus on that when, you know, the first step should be to try to help people to understand that they have to remove power away from these corporations, to stop giving them money and to be more reliant on your community and less on them, right?
Yeah, and a big thing like that, like to tag it back to trauma or whatever, is like a lot of the institutions in America or around the world, like jail and stuff, like are they're like traumatizing and, you know, rip families apart or whatever and create further like systemic problems and harder to like organize people when they're subject to trauma like that. So yeah, I think like emphasizing like morality and how people are treated, and trying to get rid of the institutions that you know, create these problems from the get go, from like breaking families up, or you know, like war for instance, in war zones, majority of the deaths are women and children and civilians, and or even casual or people that are injured or affected by war. So it's like all these problems are like created from that. So I think the advocacy best placed is things that are focused on that.
Mhm. So how do you think we can motivate people to do more shadow work or to be more self-aware? Because in a lot of cases, I don't know if you guys have experienced this also, like you try to tell a family member, someone you care about, hey, have you thought about seeking therapy? You know, that could probably help you out. And a lot of them say, you know, I don't need that. Or they say, yeah, sure, but then they keep pushing it off further and further. Or they're probably just not, they can't afford it. So what would you recommend to people?
So one thing that I've had a lot of success with is to just let the person know that you're there to support them. You're not judging them. You're there to support them. Everyone, no one's perfect, but also just like if they have concerns about going and they're not comfortable, see if they want you to go with them, and then you don't even have to go in the room with a therapist because that's a whole other can of worms with HIPAA. But just that they know that like either you wait outside for them or just that they know that you're close. You know what I'm saying? So that they can get through and they can have time to process what they're going through. So
Yeah.
that's just one idea.
Yeah, fear is a big factor in it because it's like, well, I don't want to open up. Like, I'm just trying to go to work. I'm trying to, keep my head above water. I'm just trying to take care of my friends, my family, and myself, and, all these things. And I just can't deal with anything. I can't drudge up anything extra. I can't, I don't know if I can deal with all that. So there's like this fear aspect of it. So, I always try to say, like, there's things in there, good and bad, that you can discover about yourself. It's not always, doesn't always have to be like bad things in your shadow. And even if it is like something that you would say is negative, when you are repressing parts of yourself, that means like there's good things about yourself and good things in your life that you can't allow yourself to feel. Like it goes both ways. So it opens up a lot of positive things too. And having somebody that's like a friend that can be there for them and help them through it is a huge, huge, huge like benefit.
I think just starting conversations with friends, family about getting therapy, just making trauma-informed decision and choices is a big help. Just talking about things openly helps to normalize therapy and getting help. And I feel like that's kind of the first step that makes people feel a little bit more comfortable and think like, okay, maybe this is like a possible solution for me.
Yeah. And there's also that stigma too of like, well, I'm not crazy. I don't need therapy. But that's like why you go to therapy is because so you're not crazy. Like, of course,
Mm.
that's why I try to tell people. It's like, well, no, that's why I go to therapy. So I'm not, I don't go crazy because
Yeah.
like if I just let all this stuff build up and I don't learn the coping mechanisms that I need for it, then yeah, I'm going to like, it's going to manifest in bad ways. So it's a preventative thing as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not too sure about like the older generations. I mean, it varies. I feel like sometimes the older generations feel a lot more comfortable with it because they might think like, oh, I'm older, it's kind of too late for me, or maybe they just don't want to like have to face and deal with all the traumatic experiences and events that they've gone through through their entire life. Um, but I feel like it's becoming a lot more normalized in the younger generations. Like even celebrities are like openly talking about how they get therapy and everything. And I feel like, maybe that's something that we might see get normalized, um, you know, over the next few years.
Mhm.
One thing
I
that
think that
yeah, go ahead, Shadow Man. My bad.
I think that that like things like the 12-step program kind of like has like an outline of like that you can just look it up online and just like following that on your own or just like being aware of it or even just being like introduced to philosophy or like whatever medium you're into, like if you're in a video, for instance, like that Gabor Mate clip, short clips or like documentaries, things like that can like help to get people into it. But for instance, like the 12-step program outlines like a lot of the problems I think with like the activist community and like how if they maybe followed these steps and expanded even further on them, that they could like rhetorically uh, uh, fight like bad information or like power structures and like organize better.
Yeah,
uh,
and really, that was a good point in that. Like the thing with 12-step though is that everyone's mileage will vary, and I think it's a big thing that needs to be understood that if you're going through something like that, you don't necessarily need 12-step to do it, and that's like a great point, Prop. But what I do think is a benefit is group therapy, like in a sense that you do get from going to things like AA meetings. But that's kind of why like communities like we have here, like we have at Yale Bros, is because you can do those on your own. You don't necessarily need to go to a certain place at a certain time. And I will say that a lot of it's not universal, but there are some groups, and they're very judgmental on any new person. And so essentially, what I'm getting at is that don't think because you went to an AA meeting or two that group therapy is a bad idea, or like getting your issues out is a bad idea. It's likely just because you went to one that was just not good. There are some highly toxic ones. So again, that was something I had to learn on my own that I think is key to tell to people is that there's not one way to recover, and it's not even just about a lot of substance addiction is driven by trauma. So trauma really affects so much. That's why I really love Gabor Mate's work, is because he covers trauma so well and he puts it in terms that everyone can understand.
Mhm. And also being able to differentiate between pain and harm, because just because something hurts doesn't mean that it's always harmful. Because going through like past traumas, doing shadow work, it can be uncomfortable or even painful, but it's not harmful. Because I mean, like we just automatically assume that pain equals harm, but I mean, like if you are training for like a marathon, if you're experiencing some level of discomfort, well, that's just you getting better. That's you pushing yourself to get better. So discomfort and pain doesn't always equal, like you got to be able to differentiate between what's harmful and what isn't. And doing the shadow work is definitely painful, definitely uncomfortable, but it's not harmful.
Exactly, and those are some great points, Stevie. Because like one thing I will recommend, and first off, I just recommend if you don't meditate now to just try, and when I say meditate, I don't mean anything formal. Just sit down, close your eyes, and focus on your breathing a little bit. Just be in that moment of breathing, just to get out of like, you're sort of unplugging from the matrix in certain aspects. And
Yeah.
a lot of that, some of it can be very painful. Like, I'm not gonna lie, some of very traumatic shit can come up during that. But once you've conquered some of that stuff, it really makes you feel like you can do a lot more. And like, meditating has saved me so many times.
Yeah.
As someone that goes to 12-step meetings and is actively involved in 12-step groups and am working through the 12 steps, I don't really recommend going through that shit on your own. There's a reason why you're supposed to go through that with a sponsor, someone that's already worked the 12 steps, because, well, I guess regardless of that, before I go off on a tangent about it, is that what you were saying, Prof, is that it's true, is that the 12 steps do provide a good framework for a whole lot of people. I think, honestly, I think it could provide a good framework for most people. And being that I think where most of the work is done is between steps 4 and 9, right? Being that...
Step 4 being the main one, the fearless moral inventory.
Yeah, I mean, because how well do you really know yourself until you put that shit down on paper and you're forced to look at it, right? And then how well do you know yourself before you can admit that to yourself and to another human being? In step 5, and then in step 6 and 7, those are all about trying to at least mitigate some of those things, and be okay with the shortcomings of those things. And then making amends for being a shit in your prior life. And I don't know if I've heard Gabor Mate say it, or if I heard it in another 12-step speaker meeting, or whatever the fuck. But not all addicts or not all people who use drugs are addicts, and not all addicts use drugs. We are an entirely obsessive society. That, I mean, we're trained that if you take something from out of your body and you put it in your body, then it's gonna fix whatever the fuck's going on with you at that point, you know? And that's really, it's dangerous, because that provides the framework for addiction. I believe addiction has nothing to do with drugs myself. I think addiction is an obsessive state of mind and a set of compulsive behaviors. Like that's my own thing. Like I don't push the 12 steps on anyone. But if you are having issues with addiction, gambling, overeating, sex, any type of these addictive behaviors, then 12 steps can be very useful. And some of them are toxic, but I think mostly, I think there's a degree of suffering at which almost all people will endure in their life, right? Not everything is fucking puppy dogs and rainbows. And this actually kind of got me out of that whole like classist thinking, because I go to fucking 12-step groups with fucking lawyers. And some of those lawyers are corporate lawyers that do corporate law for corporations against fucking union people like me. And we get along just fine because we suffer just the same, right? And getting someone to acknowledge that suffering is okay and they don't have to fucking bottle that and they can learn and grow from it is very helpful. But, I mean, we are a traumatizing society with an insanely mentally ill way of dealing with it, and when people are suffering, the best way to approach someone who's suffering is just to tell them, you know, I went through something similar, and this is how I got through it. I'm not saying I'm a fucking guru. I'm not saying I'm all the way through it. I'm still in recovery, right? But like, yeah, I don't know. It's a very touchy subject. Don't be dictatorial about because the way that I guess I can close is to say that I don't want to fix people, and I don't want people to fix themselves. I want everyone to grow for themselves. And how can you successfully change your perspective into things are not happening to you, they're happening for you.
Yeah, I just want to point out, like, what I think is also important is just like when I tell people that to diversify where they get their information from, like, you don't only just want to get one perspective. If you're getting therapy from like a professional or something, that's just one person. It's still a human being. It's one perspective. Yeah, they may know a lot about a certain topic, but there's a bunch of other people who you can get information from. So there's a lot of books on shadow work. There's a lot of books on psychology, on spirituality, on meditation, on yoga. You can diversify your sources when it comes to that. You can find therapy in that. You can talk to some friends, find a group, in your community where you can talk about these things. What do you guys think about that? Diversifying your sources for how to, maintain yourself
I think it's a great
mentally.
idea.
I mean, absolutely. Arm yourself with as much knowledge and experience. I mean, talk to other people that have gone through it. Reach out, like go to meetings. If that's not your thing, try something else. I mean, some
Yeah.
people meditate by sitting in silence or something like that. But like I meditate by doing manual labor, like mowing the lawn, stuff like that. I mean, you just gotta find what works for you, and maybe it's just like taking a little bit from here and there and making it work for you. But everybody's just gotta figure it out on their own. And the best way to do it is just ask for help. That's what I do. It's just like I talk to people. I say, hey, how did you get through it? What worked for you? I learned coping skills. I mean, I looked to YouTube. I went to therapists. I mean, I did all kinds of stuff to try to work through a lot of the trauma and like the, like addiction stuff. So, I mean, it's just, and no one set way worked for me. I just had to take a little bit from here and there.
That's actually a great point about diversifying. I go to 12-step meetings. I see a therapist twice a month individually, and I do group therapy sessions twice a month as well, on top of my 12-step meetings and my therapy sessions, as well as, I mean, I read spiritually empowering literature, like Tao Te Ching is one of the things that I'm really into right now, and meditating on the teachings of that. And I think one of the more beautiful things that I've heard out of that, or read out of that, is that if you're living in the past, you're depressed. If you're living in the future, you're anxious. But if you're living in the present, you are at peace.
Mm.
And who doesn't want a little more peace in their life? So learning how to be a little bit more present. I mean, drawing from these ancient techniques is probably a good idea. But yeah, diversify.
Yeah.
There's no one way for everyone to recover. That's just not a fucking thing. There's no one way for everyone to move forward, and everyone's a little bit
Be
different.
very wary of anyone that says that there only is one way, because that's immediately sus in my book.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's psychological and spiritual terrorism.
There's several paths up the mountain.
Thank you, Shadow Man. I've been looking for what to call that.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
several paths up the mountain. You can learn from
goal is
ancient
not to, like,
yogis and all that, and
eradicate-
philosophers. Sorry, go ahead, Redneck Anonymous.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I just wanted to say, like, the goal isn't to eradicate sadness, because, I mean, that's what it seems like. A lot of these doctors that I went to would just automatically, like, try to give me a prescription. I'm like, no, I just need to deal with this. And then eventually, I mean, it was probably over a decade of seeing doctors that I finally saw a doctor that said, hey, medication only gets you so far. I mean, the other half is actually learning how to deal with things. And he said, well, because I was telling him about my problems, he goes, well, yeah, you should be depressed. I'm like, thank you. Thank you for acknowledging that. Like, I don't know why that was so hard. It's just like, no, I mean, there's certain things, like if you lose your job, if you go through these certain traumas, the solution isn't to pretend like everything's fine and just get to being happy. Like you're gonna have to feel sad sometimes or angry or disappointed. Like you have to go through those negative emotions and process it so you can get to the other side of it. Like just medicating it or dousing it in substances is not going to make it go away. It just like bottles it up and lets it fester, pretty much.
Yeah, that kind of brings to mind like toxic positivity, where you're kind of like, I don't really believe in the fake it till you make it belief system. I think it's healthy to just experience all the feelings that you're feeling because you're human and natural. Maybe if you're a little bit more sad than other people, that's fine. You just have to find ways to cope with it, not necessarily like make yourself a super happy-go-lucky person.
Well, and that's a great point, because one of the biggest things I had to learn is that it's not like, sure, there's like, it's very important to do shadow work, because you need to make sure that your own house is in order, you know what I'm saying, like first, because you need to have that base, that foundation. But also it's recognizing toxic people and people that want to put you in emotionally abusive relationships, and being able to avoid those, because that'll sink your recovery faster than, and not just from substances, recovery from any kind of trauma gets, you know, in my opinion, gets sank immediately when you deal with toxic people. They want to bring you down to their vibrational, you know, area, which is not a good place, and it just drags you down. And so avoiding toxic people, I think, is huge. But yeah, those are all great points.
Yeah. I think reading books on how to deal with people is important too. Reading books on relationships, you know, how to deal with social environments. Even books on like how to deal with like cults. Like there's a lot, like a lot of people are susceptible to that. Like their social groups can become a cult. And so there, you know, there's books on that, how you can deal with that. But yeah, like you shouldn't feel, another thing I want to say is, you don't feel bad about emotions that you feel. Like if you feel angry or you feel really sad, you know, let those emotions out. I mean, I've heard that, you know, from, you know, one of the people who are here today, right? Y'all, bro, something you say, like, just let them all out. These are healthy emotions.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you break your arm but feel no pain, your body's not responding and telling you that you need to be fixed, all right? So pain is pretty necessary. Now there's two different things here in regards, like you guys talking about trauma. There is the healthy version of trauma, which will never go away because we wouldn't want it to go away, right? We want to be traumatized when we fall from a tree so that we learn not to climb so high and fall off or whatever the fuck. Or we want to be able to run, like, to know that a saber-toothed tiger will rip us in half. We want those types of traumas. But then there's the other kind of trauma where it's almost viral, like virus-like. The way it spreads from one person to the next. When someone takes their own, it's called malignant trauma, and passing it on to another, right? I beat my kid because my dad beat me and his dad beat him, and it all falls in line like it's passed on like a virus. Doesn't always have to be that way.
Self-fulfilling prophecies too.
Yes. So in regards to something like that, it can be, those are a lot more spooky to deal with, but the only way to really, in my opinion, to get through those things is to develop a psychological immunity to it. Like when you bring up cults or whatever, toxic people in your life, right? You need to be able to develop the immunity against that. How do you do that?
That's a great way to think about that, man. That's a great way. I've never heard it explained like that.
Well,
I think a good way to like build up immunity to it, like first, is to recognize, because a lot of people just don't recognize they're continuing like a cycle of trauma and abuse. They literally have like no idea.
oh yeah.
Or maybe they do, but it's subconscious. So I think the first step is to always just recognize it consciously.
Well,
And even that can be kind of like difficult and ugly because, you know, you're facing something about yourself that you're continuing, and maybe some people just like don't want to believe it.
oh yeah, oh yeah, and the solution is always going to be existential for one person to follow their path, another person to follow their path, another person to follow their own path. Like, it is existential. And it always takes me back to Joseph Campbell and his kind of famous words of follow your bliss, which is you're essentially following your own path, but with your both eyes wide open while you're doing it. No squinting, no, trying to see something that's not actually there, like completely wide open to really observe your own experience and follow things that you love, right? And love doesn't always mean happy sunshine and rainbows. Some people are weirdos like me that like to, that like Batman shit, right? Wants to beat up criminals at night or something, right? It's dark, but it's love, right? He's trying to fight bad for the sake of good. So I like Joseph Campbell's notion of follow your bliss. Just do it with your eyes open, observing yourself and observing the world around you. And I think like something like a cult type of thing, or an abuser or someone who's toxic, I think some part of your mind will recognize it if you're living through that state of bliss of, this is the thing I want to go for, but this smells something smells off here. I'm so used to my own existence and experience that this thing smells foreign. And then you can at least intuitively see something. I will shut up now. Good.
Especially when you see an emotion, like a very strong emotional reaction that you're getting from somebody else. It's just like, oh, okay, so where's this coming from? Is this something in my shadow? Is this something, am I reacting to something that I went through in the past? And one of the things that I found helpful was the feeling that you're having in that moment. When was the last time you felt like that? Who was it with? What was the situation? And it's just like, oh, okay. So it's not really about that person. It's about this other thing that I went through before that I never resolved, right? And I'm not perfect at it. I still have my moments, but it's you don't always catch it in time, but it's a learning experience. And the more that you practice with it, the better you get at it.
The shadow is it's a very difficult navigation because it's essentially your ego, the forefront of your mind, trying to investigate the darker aspects of yourself, right? And the ego is being pulled from several directions, not only those negative emotions, but also the world outside, right? If you're thinking about yourself, but someone throws a kickball at you, all of a sudden your attention is snapped towards that kickball, right? And then you lost all your focus on the shadow aspect. So I kind of look at the shadow like it's a giant factory of your things, but it's pitch black, and all you have is this tiny flashlight we call the ego. And you have to kind of navigate and touch and feel around for what's keepable and what you should be like disregarding in regards to ideas, not emotions, but like bad ideas themselves. There's my little metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's also important to also just kind of remember that, doing shadow work is kind of like just experiencing radical acceptance, and it's kind of both. It's kind of dual. You realize that you are absolutely not your ego or your shadow, but you also realize that it is you. Like, I'm not really sure how to explain it further than that, but like, it's not you and it is part of you at the same time, and you just kind of have to accept it.
Exactly.
You're experiencing the observer and the observed simultaneously, which is why the mind is so tricky.
And that's what happens during meditation. Like, the whole purpose is to be aware, be aware of yourself, being in that present moment. Like, the present moment is awareness, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, so there's a lot of I think it's kind of interesting that there's supposedly so many different ways to meditate, but the one thing I will say is, I do more of the Zen style practice, where there's two ways you can do the Zen style. And I'm forgetting names. I'm thinking of Zazen, if you want to look into it a little bit more. But it's more of an approach on using your breathing to get into a meditative state, on where you're kind of experiencing. You're not trying to do the meditation where you're trying to quiet your mind, so to speak, but you're trying to let things come up that are rippling below the surface. The way I always think about it is like a stream going down like a river, and you're looking at a river, and the current moment is exactly where the water is right before it passes you. Your future is looking down the river and see what's coming down the river, right? And then your past is where the river's already gone. You can't change that part, right? So I like to think of that metaphor when I'm getting in that state. But again, I don't think there's a wrong way to meditate if you're being thoughtful about it. Like being mindful about it. So that's just my take on it.
So where can people, find more information about this stuff? I mean, you guys are bringing up all these authors, or all these like philosophers, or spiritual people, because
Sure.
when you're trying to communicate with people, when you're trying to raise people's consciousness, like we want to be able to explain these, very articulately, like how you guys are doing here. And you want to give other people, some references. Say, hey, like you should check out this person or this book here. It can help you out with your personal stuff. Because that's what we're trying to do here, with these solution talks. Is like, how can we raise
Sure.
consciousness with our community?
So one really quick thing that I would do, a really quick read. If you read the Tao Te Ching, it's spelled Taote. Ching, and you can find online copies, but it's only like a few pages. There's not more than like a few hundred verses, and each verse the verses sound like truisms at first, but when you start getting more into them, they're really things that are like known, but we don't really think about in those terms of a simplistic approach. And there's some wild stuff in there. Like there's things talking essentially about why imperialism is bad before they knew what to call it that. Where they talk about, if your cities are surrounded by, weapons of war, your people will go hungry. And, it was given as kind of contra-Confucian guidance. So, like, there was the Confucianism, and then there's Taoism. They're dialectics in very many ways. They're kind of like the opposites. The more legalistic Confucian framing was meant for rulers as a guide. So it's related to the Tao in that aspect that the Tao Te Ching was also guidance for rulers, but it's more about being in harmony with nature, and that nature shows us the path. We're just not listening.
I love the idea of referencing work. Oh, sorry, good.
No, you go ahead.
I love the idea of referencing other people's work and, like authors or even lectures or all that stuff. I love that. But I think what resonates with people more is when you add yourself to it. Like, oh, this is the mindset I was in when I first heard this.
Yeah.
Or here's the effect it had on me. Or here's why it was effective for me. Because, right, we're always carrying that notion that your solution for yourself might not be the same for the other person. But if they hear your existential experience of it, maybe they can find their own version of something. Or they might happen to resonate with the thing you're talking about. So, yeah, I love referencing things. Like I referenced Joseph Campbell, but if we could tie it to, like, why it helped us or where we
Sure.
our fucking mindset. Yeah.
I've got a good one for you. So the reason why I went with the Tao Te Ching, it had been a book that I'd read when I was studying world religions, but like Taoism's not technically a religion. It's more of a guidance in spirituality. It's very much like non-aggression. It's about being in harmony with nature. The reason why I went with the Tao though is because my mind likes to make things super complex. And you can't do that with the Tao. And I mean, you can try. I've tried in my mind, but it's very simply put, and it helps me simplify my own framing of how I think about things and really become less reactive to events and become more proactive on my overall approach and mindset, because it lets me simplify and quiet the noise. And again, it may not work for everyone because it may be too simple. But for me, the simplicity is because I deal with things too complexly. So what I was seeking was the most simplest form to engage with, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And yeah, like relating that with others to where if someone's in that similar state, or even if it's just someone just hearing a different perspective, like, oh, okay, you can, like, wait a minute, you can actually learn things from other things? Okay, let me try it. Like, even that could be something simple like that.
It's a huge point, though, because, again, that's why, I don't like really citing a lot of work, because I think you're right. When we do cite work, we need to tie in why it worked for us, because being genuine about things is a massive way to communicate and build trust the healthy way. And so
Yeah.
by doing that, yes, you're giving a part of yourself to someone, but if you're willing to bring up the book, you should be able to talk about why you read it. And I do think that that's a very great way to, I mean, just essentially handle that, you know, to get people into something more so than just saying, oh, you need to read this. No, explain on an emotional level why you went to that, or even on a technical level. Depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Yeah,
shout
no,
out this channel that I've been watching. It's this, like, you were talking about cults or whatever. There's this woman that is like a former cult member in this thing called the Moonies, and she's like reading a book about that cult, and is like kind of like analyzing like leaving the cult and like how she's feeling now about it and all this stuff. It's called Faith Y3N. Yeah, either like YouTube stuff or like movies or book, whatever like the format that someone likes. I would like base it off of what the person likes.
Right, like tailor it to them. Like if
and
they,
try and get them into something with.
yeah, like if
Yeah.
if the person learns best like through lectures or
I
through
always
seeing
do that.
videos and stuff,
I
you
definitely
recommend
do
those stuff. You can recommend that to them. Or if they're like a reader,
Music,
you can recommend books. Like if they like to self-investigate and stuff, you can recommend books to them. But yeah, it's just like
Or,
tailor made for the person.
I have a question, and I don't mean to sound blunt or like rude, but like, what does any of this achieve? Like, reading books about Taoism. I mean,
Or like a lot of
Like,
stuff,
I
like
think when I ask,
psychology, systems
what-
thinking,
what's
and all
the-
that.
If you want me to let you know what it did for me personally, I can definitely explain that to you. Because again,
Well,
it's not like this.
I don't mean to pick on you, Jack. I'm just saying, like, in general, like,
No.
what is like
Yeah.
reading all this books about self-help and
So
Well,
it's not even a self-help book.
let me finish. Because it's like,
Sure.
I feel like these are all things that we should be doing on our own time, I guess. And like, okay, if that's what you're into, like, yeah, you should be talking about it with people, I guess. But if we're talking about like political change and like what this is a solutions call, so I'm just wondering, like, I'm just really wondering, like, what it, like.
Sure.
I don't mean to sound like a dick.
No,
I'm
like
just wondering what this.
it's
will-
good.
I get you.
It's good that you asked this.
Because I got one that, for instance, someone that's really crass to work with, that in like the political scene, like if they worked on themselves, it might be like smoother to work with them and more appealing to work with them. Like for
But
instance, I don't know, like Randy Credico, and I think if Randy Credico, worked on his inner shadows and maybe some of the problems that he's had in his past, and it's probably from childhood, that like maybe he wouldn't be as crass as he is, or just like there's a plethora of people in the activist scene
Yeah,
that you can just
I'm
see
with
they're like, yeah,
But
they're
it's
like
like-
all over the map.
Are we gonna expect everybody to be mentally like pure before we're gonna be able to work with them, or you know what I mean? Like,
No.
I don't
I
think
think
it's
the
so
point
much
is to
of-
work with them along the way.
I
Yeah,
don't think
I
the
know
point
it
is to
helps.
make people pure. I think the point is to try and provide people a little bit of hope at a personal level so that we can work towards a political solution. Because a political solution wrought of broken people without any hope of inner peace before the political solutions come, I think we're just setting ourselves up for failure. I mean, your political solutions won't solve everything, and if you come up with a solution politically of broken people, then you're going to have a broken political solution.
well, we're dealing with broken people. There's so many broken people, so we're not gonna have everybody.
yeah.
That's like you and I
Well-
can be doing this, right, for the betterment of ourselves, so that we can prepare ourselves to deal with people who aren't able to like cleanse their.
Well, I don't
Yeah.
think it's either or, Josh. I think it's yes and.
Yeah.
That's
It
exactly what
has
my
to
point
be.
was going to be. You're not going to read this book and it's going to like magically fix your life or do anything like that. I'm saying that if you're one of the people that has an issue with over complicate, like making things overly complicated, like I like to do personally, reading something like the Tao for me allows me to get out of my head. And when I get out of my head, it allows me to really focus on, focusing on the issues that I not need to
I didn't
only
mean
accomplish
to
for
do about
me.
you, Zach.
To be
Yeah.
no. I think it's a great question because
Yeah.
it goes back to what Jordan was saying, that we shouldn't just recommend books without telling why it works. So again, it's more the simplicity thing, because I agree, like just reading a book is not going to change or fix anything, and someone who just does that is not understanding the thing of it. The reason why I come back to it is because in my own experience, it relates more to my understanding of spirituality, but it's also it's a book that challenges me in a simple, what seems like a simple way, but ends up going down a very interesting, like different rabbit holes of my past life. And it can be just a verse or a phrase that brings me back to thinking about that. And it's helped me like work through a lot of trauma that way, because it would be in the subconscious. Whereas if I can get my mind distracted a little bit in a healthy way by reading something like, like that, then it can bring it up naturally. So, and again, it's not going to work for everyone, but that's a great question.
I was
Yeah.
just like talking
Really
about
good
how
question.
realistic it is. So like, if we're like dealing with such global catastrophe, like problems,
It's just one small
to
tool,
massive
yeah.
scale, like how is the conversation even on like books? Because I feel it's like there's so many crazy things that like we need to do and we don't even fucking know about. But it's like we're kind of talking about like how do we better ourselves, and that's kind of, I mean, yeah, that's good, that's important. Like you guys know, I've dealt with a few people that have needed some of this themselves, I'll say, like Randy Credico. But I also believe that you're gonna deal with people like that in life. That's like not everybody, even if they are going to, maybe who knows, Randy Credico might even fucking be going to therapy and doing everything that we're talking about. But people and they're assholes, and if you're trying to get shit done, you're gonna be dealing with personalities. So I feel like that's a, I mean, yeah, we need to.
I think that's even better. That's an even better justification for what we're talking about. Is that, yeah, you're going to be dealing with some personalities, right? And they might not be the best personalities, but if you don't have yourself figured out, if you're going to go thinking that you're going to change the world without first trying to right yourself, like I think that's a recipe for disaster, right? Like I've brought it up here before, is that when a path is focused on vengeance and not justice, then you're headed for masochism, right?
You know what? Like I said,
Baby, that was beautiful.
my opinion, this is two different
not
discussions.
masochism.
Yeah.
This is like you can better yourself, but we like if we're talking about political change, I'm sorry, that's what you bring to the table. How you come to the table mentally is before the conversation. It's not a part of the conversation, in my opinion. You guys.
I think it is before the conversation. That's
not important, but I'm saying as when we're talking about like what solutions do we need, I think that when we're just saying, yeah, we need to learn more about ourselves, we need to internalize, yeah, these are important things, but this is a separate discussion. What are our demands? What do we need?
Well,
How do we know what our demands are?
We have to efficiently deliver them, and part of that is being self-aware. Yeah, go ahead, yo.
Part of this conversation is also just talking. I mean, it's great to talk about our experiences and everything, but I mean, we have to acknowledge that if people are not, conscious of these, how do I put it? These cycles that they put themselves through, the trauma that they have, they're going to be stuck. So they're not, you're not even going to be open-minded to any solutions if you're stuck in your own toxic trauma
And
that's
cycle.
not everyone's fault, Some people are stuck there.
But I think it's nobody's fault that they're there, but I think it is their, I don't want to say problem, but it's their job to, get themselves out of that. Because, it's great if you have somebody to help you, but obviously you need to help yourself first before anybody else can help you. And if you're not making trauma-informed choices and decisions, you're not going to be open to any solutions at an individual level or at a collective level.
All I'm saying is
You're not going to be as effective. Like that's what I was trying to. It's like you're not. This is not an easy thing that we're trying to do. Like we have to be, and not a physical battle, but we are in a battle against the powers. Like we are trying to wrestle back power. We are trying, like we are battling for healthcare and all these other things that we need. So we have to be battle ready, mentally, physically, emotionally, all that. And so it's like protecting myself in order to make sure that I can't be manipulated. Nobody's foolproof. You still can.
Just saying that, like, not everybody is gonna have the wherewithal and even the capabilities to internalize everything and make these self-corrections so that they can come to the table ready or correct. So with that in mind, I'm asking,
But isn't that a good example?
people that are not receptive to these things, how do we talk to them if they're not going to be able to, because of what they're traumatized by and what they're dealing with day to day, they're not able to come to terms with it, and they're stuck. So I'm asking,
Do you think that a political
This
solution
is a cod language.
One, do you think people create anything but broken solutions?
I'm asking how does a movement that is trying to have everybody say, okay, you need to be perfect before you come
Perfection is not the goal, because if there's no finish line, because you're constantly changing, you're constantly making new mistakes, developing new traumas. There's no finish line on this, and that's why some people get really bogged down in this, and then they get lost in it. That's all there's no action, and all this is just like overwork, personal work. You get almost like addiction in itself to self-care or self-help. It's just that's not helping anybody, but it has to be a little bit of both. Like you have to be able to work on yourself, and as you get stronger, as you are helping other people, as you're doing your actions, but it can't be one. Actions without mindfulness it can lead to disaster pretty easy.
I don't.
But also, just focusing on that without doing actions is it's not helping
in groups like Yell Bros, like Yell Bros and Prod Server, and even here now, yeah, okay, we can work on each other's argumentals. We can recommend these things, but I'm saying if we're talking about
I think it's positive.
when we're going out, what are we doing with these people? I'm saying why is this a part of the conversation?
I think the overall reason why it's productive is because it's talking about normalizing mental health.
And actually
It's
apply
something that people can get behind.
All right, I can't even fucking finish a point. I'm just trying to.
That's right.
Well, I'm done now. I'm just trying to finish my point.
I hear you, man. I understand what you're saying. I just feel like probably if we zoom out, the conversation is more about normalizing mental health and seeking out help for that. Everyone has their own demons, and that no one has to be ashamed of it, and we can normalize that aspect of it, and that in talking about that should be something that most people can get behind. So us personally talking about Taoism, maybe that's not all that productive, but if we recognize that us talking about solutions to mental health, and that's something that a lot of people have to deal with, that could be the universality of it.
Well, and think of it
I'm genuinely asking what does that change? I'm asking how does what's that game?
Sure.
You're better
I
able
wouldn't be
at
on this call if I hadn't read that one book. Just in my situation, I was
learn yourself, read it, do your thing, do whatever you want. But I'm just saying, we're talking about politics here. Yeah, the way we treat each other is important, and taking each other's.
Are we talking strictly about politics, or are we talking about an entire societal shift?
Mhm.
I don't know. I can't fucking finish. I don't know. I'm trying to. I'm genuinely asking because this is politics here. We are talking about politics. So talking person. If we're talking how to heal yourself, heal your trauma. So they're intertwined. But see, when we're going into the political realm, and fine, this is what you want to bring to the table. That's fine. I'm asking, what does it get you when you bring it to somebody with a real issue? I don't know what the fucking issue will be. Fucking, I don't know. Something in Peru. If you go to someone who cares about Castillo or what, I don't know, Fujimori, and you start talking about Taoism, I'm genuinely asking. I'm like, how does that conversation go? What's the point of that?
Only from the standpoint that it's a book that I know firsthand has helped me. And
Jack, I don't mean Taoism. I mean, like, I'm sorry. I'm talking about, like, embettering yourself mentally. Like, you approached it. Is that what you approaching them with, or are you approaching them with? That's why I'm saying, like, what's the point?
It's not declarative, as in like I'm saying everyone must read this or
I know,
to
I'm
help
sorry,
them.
Max. I know.
No. You need to apologize. I just need to be more clear about it. It's more so that I think there are some books that are just like they can make things click for certain like mindsets. And I know personally mine has just dealt with overcomplication, which makes sense because I worked in heavily technical areas. And the problem was it made me toxic. And I wouldn't the reason I'm saying I wouldn't be here is I wouldn't be able to hold my cool without the self-work that I've done through not just that one book. It's a lifetime of finding books that have relevant things like that. And also people, though. That's the main element that I prefer to talk about, is that it's not just the book. It's also people. People are a huge part of it. Because if you just read the book and you don't have anyone to bounce any of the ideas off of or put it to work, then it becomes infinitely harder.
And if you have a political goal that you want to achieve, then you need to be as effective as possible. And if you think of your brain as like a CPU, right? And if you go into your computer, look at the CPU, you can see that some of it is being spent on things that it doesn't need to be spending it on. And so, like, your computer isn't as effective because it's running all these useless tasks in the background. So that's what, like, a lot of trauma is, or, you know, like, you've got that constantly, like, you're spending so much mental energy on that, or you're jumping to the wrong conclusions, or going down the wrong path. So that's why I think it's important, just because, like, I want to be as effective as possible. I want to be ready for anything, mentally, physically, emotionally, like, that they're going to throw at us, because that is one of the biggest things that they use. But and not just they. I mean, I'm talking about governments, like corporations. They emotionally manipulate us in order for us to do what they want us to do. So I'm not going to be in a place where I can be emotionally manipulated like that. You know what I mean?
Oh no, I'm with you. And honestly, I think I agree on the. I think I agree on the importance of bringing your healthiest self to the table when you're trying to get things done. And I like I said, I've dealt with some fucked up experiences even in the past month, just of that. And I don't need to get specific because you guys know what I'm talking about. But all I'm saying is that everybody is not going to be there. And so I'm asking, are we approaching people with these things that we're talking about here, or are we just talking about it? Like, I'm genuinely asking, like, what's the point of what we're doing? How does what we're doing apply when we go to people who are not going to be in these mental faculties to talk about these things, to even, like, better themselves? They're not worried about that. I'm asking people to do that, but when we go out there, what happens is what I'm asking.
For me, it's like the reason why you want, you know, Medicare for all, because it's like there's things that in society that are like scientifically proven to like raise people's like standard of living or like their life expectancy, and you can see other things scientifically proven like about like the development of children and like not having parents around, or like all these things like that should go along with our activism, and it would like it's like an investment for the future for me. Like it's like investing in the children and the parents that are in the activist scene trying to change the world. They need to be aware of like the stress of what's going on in the world and how to regulate their childhood stress and how to like not create just like further traumatized people and try and like, you know, break the chain in some way.
I really wouldn't say that it's either or. I think it's yes and. And I'll circle back to that around like 50 times. It's just because, and one of the reasons what kicked off this conversation is that, like, if we don't set our own house in order, like, what kind of solution are we providing, right? Or are we just stuck in a perspective? And I think also that genuinely caring about another person's mental health and spiritual health, and being the hand that grabs theirs when they reach out for help, that creates a whole lot of camaraderie, right? And then that builds trust as well, right? It's the whole gambit of things. I don't think these types of discussions happen in a vacuum, and I think that I think totally leaving them out and just talking about like party program or I'm just in party program or fucking legislation or plans for this or that. And I think just focusing on material aspects is going to leave any solution found wanting, seriously wanting. I think it's a very important part of any type of solution
trauma is also never ending too. So it's like people's trauma might be fixed today, but then who knows? Their fucking trauma might, some crazy shit happens tomorrow.
Yeah, but they can be better able to handle it.
That perfection is gonna be like the prerequisite for fucking anything, man. Like allowing for progress to be part of the conversation, allowing for mental and spiritual progress to be part of the conversation as you talk about macro level types of situations. I think that if you have one without the other, then you're missing something, right? I think it's all integral. I think all of these things exist in a symbiotic nature, right? Like I think we definitely need to have the triquetra, right? Of the mother, maiden, and crone, right? The body, mind, and the spirit. And I think the mind and the spirit comes with the whole mental health conversation. And how do we bring ourselves to the best, our best selves to the conversation, and how do we help other people bring them their best selves to the conversation? Because we're missing that. I think that's an evolution of the 21st century that we need.
Well, let me ask this then: what's the level of priority of this? What if somebody you meet that there's somebody you meet that is not going to engage in anything? We know who is not going to engage in any of the advice that you fucking say, and just going to keep being blockheaded and stay doing the same patterns and destructive behavior. So what about them?
Then that's when we have to apply the things that we learn with how to deal with toxic people, like we were discussing here. Like there's books and stuff that we can learn on how to deal with people. Yeah.
So it's okay if it's stuff you want to learn about yourselves. Yeah, do it. God, yeah. I mean that's important, but like
you can pass that.
So it's like how do we deal with that? Like it's not just going to be as easy as reading a few things and sharpening and meditating once a day or that's important. I definitely do that, but I'm just saying you're going to deal with something.
Lead by example, actually, guys, I gotta dip out. You guys have a good night.
This is like it's all about solutions, this stream or whatever, but it's like it's a what do you call it? Like a playlist of streams, like a collection. So we're on episode 3. So it's like obviously it's not the main focus, but it should be like, you know, I think one of the pillars definitely, like it's to me, it's one of the key things in a society of like morality and the health of one's mind, body and mind. Like it's
Important. Yeah. It's
yeah,
very important.
yeah.
Are we asking how to deal with people that aren't in the realm of meaning well? To where
I'll
they're
just
just
ask my
acting?
question, Jordan, and I want you to answer. So, how, if you and I want to sharpen our mental faculties, that's great. Now, what about someone who is not going to participate in that?
I will look for. Oh, what was that second part? I didn't hear.
What's the path? Like, what do you do?
Oh, for me, when I deal with anyone, my approach is always to try and register whether they mean well or not, whether they have the willpower, whether they're trying to use their willpower to do something they perceive as good in the world, morally good. So I start there. Everything after that is just efficiency. Like, if someone believes that we should burn the school down instead of fixing it up, then I'm like, hey, it's an efficiency problem. But I think he means well, but he's really bad efficiency.
Okay.
Right? He just wants to burn it down. So I'd make distinctions like that. Right? We stand on equal footing. Once it's two different people in the realm of meaning well, then you're standing on equal platforms at that point. The rest is just
Well, but what, get out. What if that meaning well, when no matter how much you mean well, if you're fucking, like, doing something that's self-destructive, when does that turn into foul intention? And then what do you do about this, is what I'm saying. So it's like, if it is a good intention, what if they are self-destructive to the point where they are lagging you back? Do you kick them off the boat, or do you, like,
no.
You know?
No.
I mean, at that point, I feel like you need to provide them with resources or something to help them, I guess, help themselves. I mean, it depends if they want help.
What if they don't?
Well, I feel like they would probably, depending on how self-destructive they are at that point, they probably need somebody around them that wants the best for them to, I don't know, make decisions for their well-being.
I thought that was us, right? I thought that's what we're trying to do.
Not everybody's going to be
Well, I
fully
think
specialized on
everything-
that.
Make decisions
How
for others.
do we apply this as a solution?
Oh yeah, this
right?
is all about. Sorry. I was saying this would be about like oneself. Like it's not about.
No, this is not about yourself to me. This is about other people that will not engage in what you have engaged in.
No, but that's the point. Is by changing yourself, you're projecting out into the world anew, and it's like doing on to others as you would like to be done on you. It's kind of just like a cyclical thing that I don't know. It's like I don't even care if it's proven to be like effective or whatever. To me, it's just a morally justified cause. So for me, I would just put it a part of a pillar of like building a society or building a movement that morality and ethics and
My question was...
one's health is like a part of it.
My question was to Jordan. If we engage in these things and we do them for ourselves, that's great. But what about the people that don't? That was my question. So it's less about yourself. It's not about, I'm not even asking about how, like how you embed yourself. I'm strictly asking, do you look for people that will not engage with your form of, I'll call it self-help?
Okay. Well, right. This is after I made the assessment that, okay, me and this other person, we both mean well, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But their idea seems, I would say, like, if their idea seems like it's coming with a bunch of baggage with it, right, that isn't really focused on that topic, whether it's healthcare or infrastructure or whatever political topic,
Yeah.
right, then it's like, okay, I would make the argument to them that, hey, your best way of meaning well is to work on yourself. Your best expression of meaning well would be for you to work on yourself, so then you can step out into the political arena instead of offering up a solution like, we should just burn down the Capitol building. We should just do that, right? that would seem very inefficient. To where it's like, okay, maybe your best way to mean well is for you to work on yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
As opposed to others who, meanwhile, they seem our efficiencies line up more. Then it'd be like, hey, we should work on whatever it is, making posters, doing podcasts, maybe even running for office or having meetings, doing fucking skeptical street epistemology, whatever, right? Towards like, oh, you would make sense in this realm, the way you talk to people and do all this to try and get this political action forward. The other person needs to step back and maybe work on themselves so that they can, I guess, somewhat get on the similar page as the rest of us trying to do this political action of whatever, healthcare or infrastructure or Assange or anything like that. Did that answer the question?
But, yeah. But I now is my, as you've said earlier, we're not kicking anyone off the boat, right? So.
Not for men, no.
Yeah, me too. So, if we do that, then let's say I personally have someone that I can't work with. Okay. And then I have good intentions and that person has good intentions. Okay? And this is by no means a personal question. This is tying to the topic. If we both have good intentions, but both of us care more about what's going on between us and not what's going on on the outside, then what does our good intentions matter? If we're not bringing anything to the table but personal baggage, basically. So I don't think we should kick anyone out, but I'm saying, what happens when there are two people who cannot coexist, or there are organizations who cannot coexist, like the Young Turks, like Jimmy Dore? What are we? If we're the left or whatever, what are the demands there? If literally because you have a patch on your shoulder that says you're on one team or the other, you won't interact with the other person. So what's going to happen there? I get I don't like either Dore or fucking Young Turks, but that's yeah. You heard my question.
I'd have to make an assessment of each individual there, right? So if let's take the Jimmy Dore and TYT thing, right? Let's say I made the assessment that they both mean well, even though I'm not so sure about TYT. But let's say I make the assessment that they both mean well, but they have two different ways of trying to get to doing the good stuff, but they conflict with each other, like, right? To where they have a personal beef with each other. I would do an assessment to find out if, let's say, Jimmy Dore's problem with TYT is that, I view these guys as corrupt, as not meaning well, which means they're not on my team, which means I can't work with them, right? Or TYT saying, Jimmy means well, but he's a narcissist, and I can't work with him because he's a narcissist. See how those are two different scenarios where they have two different assessments of each other, and you can kind of, for what I would do, I'd try to mediate and make my own and bring that to them. Like, hey, let's find out if TYT is corrupt. Hey, let's find out if Jimmy's just strictly a narcissist, right? Okay. Which is essentially trying to assess whether they mean well or not, right? If someone's just doing it for selfish reasons, that's not really meaning well for the betterment of the world. Or if someone's a corrupt asshole, that obviously doesn't meaning well. So you got to make an assessment of each individual and each scenario that happens. That's what I would do. And then you can walk back to both of them and say, hey, this is what I believe is the case. And, then have a discussion with them on that.
But if they're not looking past either of their visors, their ego, like I think someone was talking about earlier, then how do we deal with them? Yo, Red Sea, did you have a question or something? Red Sea I think might have had like a comment in the chat. I don't know if I don't see anything. I was outside, but
I didn't see it.
yeah. What's up, Sebs?
Quack. God damn it.
Yeah.
I actually asked
What were you saying? Fucking well. If they're not, if these people are not, they're not seeing past their own egos. But we're all trying to get something, quote unquote, together. Where do we go?
If they really are that locked into that, I would, right, if I made that assessment, I'd be like, hey, you should probably work on the baggage you're dealing with to move on, because if you can't handle a Jimmy Dore or a TYT, what do you think the U.S. government's going to do with us? So like, oh, okay, this is how I think this is the best way for you to mean well, for the best way for you to express meaning well. Until you get through this, then you can move on to, okay, let's focus on the U.S. government or whatever the fuck. Or you kind of do both at the same time, right? Because we're not talking dangerous things, right? We're just talking about, I have a beef with this person has a beef with me, as opposed to like someone doing something like fucking crazy violent, right? That's different. So you can study.
Is it dangerous when people are donating thousands of dollars to them and they're fucking they're literally like, people take every word seriously? I think that's dangerous. Fred C had a question. Why is private advice on how to treat people?
Hey, Josh, let's not talk about, personal conflicts that, some of the people that are here are going through, some of the people in the chat. It's fine. But yeah,
But let me just answer this real quick, Frederick. Right? All right, the audience, right? If the audience is giving money to these guys and they're doing, and they themselves could be dangerous, right? Once again, you judge it individual by individual. You make an assessment of each individual. Are you giving money because you truly believe Jimmy Dore is doing something righteous and you're like, I want to support him doing it? Or he's destroying TYT, that's why I want to give him money to overthrow TYT, right? There's all these different reasons why someone might act in the world. You have to do those assessments individual by individual. And yes, fanboying and sycophancy can be very fucking dangerous. I agree with that. It's just you have to take it individual by individual, why they're doing what they're doing, or at least trying to figure it out.
Well, I mean, I think it's pretty clear to me at least, what both of them are doing, but their audiences are something to speak to, and there's thousands of people there. Same with Tim Pool. That's why you guys study him, I believe. So these people that really are not gonna be on the same page with us anytime soon. What's like? I mean,
I would really stop from what I'm on.
I mean, good intentions might. I mean, they might have to be like presumed. Like we might just have to meet at the table on some things, right? And just be able to like go from there, and not like you don't have to be perfect on your end, and I don't have to be perfect on my end. I don't even have to change after you. We can just work with each other now. I mean, do you do that?
I mean, well, yeah, you could work with each other now, but the elephant in the room is what Shadow brought up before, which is if you allow this baggage to just sit there, and then you continue on to get whatever thing done, whatever policy done, or even like voting in your own party into the government, and you guys take over the whole electoral system and all that shit, or even revolution, whatever the fuck, right? Like if all that baggage is just sitting there, it seems inevitable that it's going to implode at some point, because the differences between like if you're someone calling a Jimmy fan a fucking Jimmy fan, and they're calling you're just a hater, right? Or there's no real communication there, and you guys say, okay, let's put it to the side and get this thing done. It's like that baggage is still there, and it's like, well, how dangerous can fanboying be?
What if getting that thing done is like You set the baggage aside, you get that thing done, and then you realize, oh, a month later, that was stupid. We didn't need to have that disagreement back then, right?
Just to clarify, is with us like we're voting progressives into the Democratic Party, or we are with us as in third party?
Huh?
I don't think that it's hypothetical, man. So I don't think that means too much.
Well, that's where I'm coming from at it from all this is because like we want to be charitable to people, and where I'm coming from with all of this is like we're being not charitable to progressive people. Because I'm actually coming from this realizing that there's a lot of people further to the left than me, and usually when I run into people who are further to the left than me, I usually get dragged to the left. So my introduction to this channel and this kind of stuff was after the March for Medicare for All. So like I was there with that whole Kobe exchange with the protester about Cori Bush and all this kind of stuff,
cool.
and I thought that was all very interesting at the time. And I didn't even recognize it was Cori Bush at the time, but she wasn't like on the ticket to be speaking that day. I only knew that Marianne Williamson was going to be there. But I've like after that March for Medicare for All, I kind of got drug into. I was searching about that whole exchange, especially when it got mentioned on Secular Talk, and that's what got me searching into it and into the channel. And I was hit with a lot of hate towards the progressives, and I can understand why some of the hate's there, but I'm curious about how people are able to find the balance between being charitable to the progressives who I would assume align with us on the policy positions almost completely, like the charitability that we're giving them versus the charitability that we're giving to people who might have 100, they completely disagree with us.
Yeah.
And we're saying to them, oh yeah, you need to look inward, and we're being really charitable to them. And while I understand that our job is to be criticizing the politicians, I'm curious about, are there some attacks that we're doing against the progressive people that are not charitable?
Okay, yeah, no, I thought I saw where you were going, but no. I think we are being perfectly aggressive to the so-called progressives in Congress, and I think you were making a good point about being the same criticism to the people on the so-called left or the Democrats as also the Republicans. And if you're willing to work with the Democrats, then you should be willing to work with the fucking Republicans too. So I don't want to talk too much, but I think we should bring that same energy to both, no matter what fucking, because all of them fucking suck, especially the progressives. So if we're gonna, as I guess people of the like populace or whatever, we need to be able to work with anybody who wants to call themselves whatever they want, because they're in their own camps for their own reasons.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Like, fuck those
Once again,
progressives in Congress, especially AOC and especially Cori Bush. That was disgusting what they did at the Capitol. Cori Bush was sitting in a car or something when Franco was there. I mean,
and that's what I'm talking about the charitability. So like that's why I was confused. Was like, if we won on that issue, like if they extended it, is it fair for us to be shitting on them because at one point they went this would get changed? I thought they extended it.
Did you watch Franco's live stream, or did you watch the clips?
No, I didn't.
Franco was.
But I don't think that Franco or any people are really shitting on him. Like they're stating their disagreement.
Yeah,
and stating their stance or whatever. That's how I see it. I don't really see people shitting.
No,
on
and that's what I'm. No. I think going there and asking them about force the vote is legitimate. I'm saying criticizing them for going to their car to get changed when we won on the eviction stuff.
Dude.
That's not what we're criticizing them on. We're criticizing on how they're treating it like, oh, like that, like you guys going to keep like acting like this is like a huge victory when it's not a victory. It's a ceasefire because people are still getting evicted, right? It only covers 90% of places in this country that were affected by COVID. And what about the 10% of people? That's still a lot of people that are going to be evicted. And this is only,
yeah, I didn't know that.
This is only like
momentum, man. You get the momentum.
Even before lockdowns happened.
Even before the lockdown
Yeah,
happened, people were losing people were losing their houses.
Before lockdowns.
People, we have
Right,
homelessness
exactly.
problem now, so why stop there and treat it like this is some huge victory? We're crying. No, like the job is far from over,
Well,
and
Franco,
yeah,
why is that? Why is that important? That's important because that would make a character assessment of whether or not they mean well, right? If they
yeah,
did it for photo opportunities, that's much different than, yes, we did this because we were saving people's lives or whatever, right? Those are two different types of people,
100%.
correct?
Yeah.
So that's why I put that meaning well thing so importantly. And people, and Franco has 100% a right to question their intentions, 100% based on what we've seen them do, based on what we know they have access to, the logic of it. It's like I have to question whether or not
Doing
exactly mean well or not.
private security
and
while
strategy
staying
with
deep on the police was like beyond parody. Like she was literally like she almost said 20 or something million. If you guys saw that interview where she was talking about I need my private security because I'm working for the people, and then she says defund the police at the end. It's like, okay, private security is even shadier than most local cops. You know what I'm saying? Jesus.
And what, is it not AOC's quote saying that like we got crumbs kind of thing? Like when you have the
when she was
momentum, you're
flailing her
supposed to keep
arms, yeah, when
pushing
she was
so
in
that
front
you
of
get
Congress, she's like,
yeah, like you're
crumbs,
supposed to
people
go
should be
over and beyond
ashamed.
so that you get like even if you get 3/4 of what you get, you're supposed to like go all of and above. Like it just
Yeah, those
shows
are
that
great
they're not
In
in
a couple of years from now, AOC's gonna look back and be like, "Wow, I was an idiot. I should have done this, this, and this." I don't think that she's actively like, "Oh, I'm really dragging
Yeah, I
along
think
these
she will.
persons on purpose to just get money and
I've-
get like pension."
That'd be a hefty argument. That'd be a
That's
hefty
not,
argument.
like, I can understand why there is that sentiment, but that's not a sentiment I am in love with at the moment. I just feel like they're probably incompetent, but they're there for they believe the right things. They're just ineffective. But and then that leads to the next question, which I think is a good question about the solution is our solution now, are we gonna be primarying these progressive people, or are we going to be focusing more on just flipping more establishment Democrats? Or are we trying to do all of it? And then what organization is going to be, the organization that we're looking to be endorsing the candidates that are running against the progressives and the establishment Democrats and, the Republicans?
So we're
Does
not
anyone
looking at electoral politics as a solution because it's not. Because we see every time like someone wins, they get in and then they give up on their promises for political expediency. We're not going to solve our issues fast enough. Like this is we have like the urgency for these crises that we're dealing with are not going to be solved fast enough via electoral politics, which is why we're having these discussions here for how we can work outside of electoral politics and beyond direct action. Because yeah, direct action is good, but we want to keep the momentum and also keep as many people aware about the problems that are going on, and inform our
one other
community.
main thing is I think those are some great points, Franco, and I think one thing that gets lost on us, and this for sure got lost on me because I used to believe in electoral solutions until I saw how the sausage was made, so to speak. Seeing what happened to Bernie with those elections, reading what was published in WikiLeaks and how endemic that was. Like, I don't know if anyone here has actually read those emails, but there's some insane shit in there. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of it, but what I'm kind of getting at is that we kind of lose sight of the local level. And I think that, like, when you look at the success of Shama Sawant or someone like that, right? You see the direct success that a person like that is able to have, and even then their hands are still tied. But at a local level, I think we can make a difference. So I think just to counterbalance this, Dad, electoralism, in my eyes, in my opinion, is not something we can do when we don't, have our agency and when we can't guarantee that everyone's vote is counted.
Yeah.
And that's just a big thing for me. But at a local level, when you're talking to votes of less than 100 in some cities, you're going to know if there was some stuff that happened. So
Yeah, exactly. Beyond local, they're gonna do everything that they can, like even sometimes locally. But it's easier to track. But for these Congress people that serve at a federal level, like they're gonna do everything that they can to prevent an actual person that's going to be effective in implementing change, like an actual activist, from winning. They're gonna have someone who's going to sell out. So
if you're not working within electoral politics, do you not vote?
I personally am not going to vote
Fucking
anymore.
voting. You kidding me?
It's one day, my dude. I'll vote, but it's just literally one day. I know who I'm voting for at the
Who
snap
am I voting
election
for?
coming up in Canada. Elizabeth Rowley. I don't need to think about it. I'm gonna vote for the Communist Party because their fucking policies are always better than the fucking other parties. So I'm just gonna quickly do that, and then I'm gonna continue with my activism.
Yeah.
It's fucking. I don't know. I don't know why you Americans literally got like fucking a year-long election, and you get all wrapped up in it.
And we
It's
need
the
we
most
need to
fucked up
deep
shit in the world.
we need to depower we need to remove power from the
Oh
corporations,
yeah, I get
and that's what
wrapped
we're
up in it too. The whole world does. That's
yeah.
the fucked up part. Is
It's
like,
a distraction. Like people get caught up with the horse race, and we're not focusing on how to take away power from the corporations, you know, by not giving them any more money and organizing with our community. So that's what we're trying to discuss here. How do we best organize within our community and take power away from the corporations?
I think you hit it right there. Is the corporations that are paying the politicians? We need to break that cycle. We need to have companies that are making these billion, or not billion, but multi-million-dollar contributions, sometimes 20 or 30, and oftentimes holding hidden means of how they're raising the money. We need
Offshoring their shit.
Yeah, we need to have them know that we're holding them accountable. So right now they make all these donations, and people talk about this candidate's bad, that candidate's bad. We need to shift it from the candidate to who's the donor. We need to start saying, well, this donor has gone for Kamala Harris. We are not going to buy and just immediately make it toxic for any company to want to vote for a candidate that doesn't go for and for all.
But we're
I
also
think,
seeing candidates that are getting like that corporate money, like we've seen like the Bernie Sanders and the AOCs and stuff that still end up doing the same thing. Like they get their small dollar donations and then they turn around and they share that money with like the Joe Manchins and people like that. And they prop up people like that. So like,
for the large companies that are making money, we have to make them suddenly feel that it's toxic to be seen as being a large donor to these candidates. I am upset about the fact that if you make all these candidates a contribution, it goes to Act Blue. And Act Blue has this thing where if you get knocked out, then it goes to the next candidate. Well, and oftentimes we don't want our money going to the other candidate. That's why we donated in the first place.
Exactly.
But
That's a
I'm
great
saying
point.
for some cereal manufacturer suddenly backs a really, really bad candidate. We have to make that company know that we hold them accountable for supporting that candidate.
And what was the most successful action of organizing against, like, in my opinion, against the system of essentially what you're talking about, Snorky? It was the Montgomery bus boycotts. That's what got, you know what I'm saying? Like, you got, like, thinking of things on that level is perfect because we and I think a lot of this is information, but there's an old Robin Williams joke about how the politicians sort of wear this shit on their outfits like NASCAR drivers. Well, what about a digital version of that, where there's like not necessarily a scorecard, because I don't believe in make-believe metrics, but just showing who's funding, like the work that Robbie Yeager does,
Yeah.
like being able to visualize that instantly and have it be unbiased and verifiable, because that's my biggest thing. It can't be rumors or hearsay. It needs to be, I would want it to be their voting record on like key bills that people in the community would think are key, like their vote, like their war record votes, you know what I'm saying, like that kind of shit.
Yeah, we should
we also
reach out to that Somerset Bean person, because that dude makes I don't even know if it's a dude or a girl, but they make like the best fucking like concise flyers and shit.
Well, we also need to factor in the
Get 'em
fact
linked up with
that
Robbie or something like that. Sorry.
our government also creates corporations. So, I mean, Alphabet, Google, Facebook, a lot of these corporations are in QTEL. Like they got government funding, like they funded these things in order to create them. So it's like now it's a chicken or the egg kind of thing where it's just like, well, okay, so is the government creating the corporations or are the corporations creating the government? But they're one and the same. I mean, pretty much.
But considering how much money that the corporations spend But like, since considering how much money the corporations spend trying to disenfranchise people, like, wouldn't the biggest middle finger to the corporations be to vote? I understand, like, you're voting. For
No, because
parties.
they own our
I
elections.
was like that, but no.
Few
Like
things
one
there.
really quick thing is
Like, even
we don't
voting for
have
parties,
we don't have we don't have self-auditable elections. Like we can't verify the code that runs on these voting machines. And it's super important to know how your vote's counted to make sure that your vote's counted. And unfortunately, it's become a partisan issue. And, that's why I've gotten into election integrity, is because basic pattern analysis can show you that something's going on. And my biggest thing is that, like, just a great example, when they did the mail-in voting, they had some of the ones that I received had already had shit marked on the person that I didn't vote for was already marked. So I was going to take photos of it, but I just shred it because I figured it was just a fake ballot or something. But things like that, like we need an auditability and accountability. You can't tell me if Amazon can package gets to your door that we can't make sure that someone's vote is counted securely, privately, and there's no voter intimidation. It's mind-numbing to me. And I don't think it's technology that's going to solve it.
The FEC publishes the information every quarter of who donates and where. So immediately in the last election, before Kamala Harris was anywhere, she was totally flat, before she flatlined or anything like that. She was the first one that the media, large media like I think MSNBC, gave money to as her hopes of being the next president. They backed her. Funny, nobody voted for her, everybody hated her. She'd lost in every single caucus or primary. She got picked to be VP. So we can go back. I mean, do a SQL query on the FEC data that you can download with and say these are the people that donated to this bad candidate. Put a balloon on it and start making it toxic to be seen as donating to those candidates. Companies that have to sell a box of cereal every morning don't want to be told that that cereal company is supporting a candidate that is going to block your child getting health care.
I just wouldn't limit that to Kamala Harris. I mean, I would assume they were also putting money into.
Well, I used her as an example because immediately before anything else, it appears that she was picked to be president. Since she couldn't get it, they put a brain dead person in there that could probably get it moved out of office so she could be president. And I'm very worried about that.
I think that these are it's a good tactic or whatever, but
if you don't go for the toxic,
I think ultimately, for me, it's like I don't like the representative government and a lot of these problems we've been talking about tonight. The people that are in power are addicted individuals, and they're addicted to power or money or friggin' the million different things. And I think advocating for a system to get away from representative democracy and have direct democracy where it's void of necessarily, obviously the masses would be voting for things and creating the bills, but to me it just seems like it's less on the individual and these especially sociopaths at the top and
rebuilding the labor movement and getting rid of the corruption inside of it.
Yeah, for instance, Marky, what you were saying kind of reminds me of getting money out of politics or whatever and Wolfpack and stuff. Yeah, it's a great tactic, but it's we've seen it they've got a million different tactics to bypass that or whatever. For instance, we're donating to Bernie Sanders and he just funnels our money into fucking Act Blue kind of thing. It's
the problem with direct democracy. People are so easily guided down tracks of manipulated. We're manipulated what cereal want to buy. The same thing happens. If we go to direct democracy, we're going to be just led down a path. And as long as we haven't broke the chain of the media, the large corporation donations, and who's in power, direct democracy will be immediately a path to fascism.
Why don't you just change the metric of who is worth voting for? Why not change it as far as, hey, if this person doesn't if they don't all out expose corruption and name names when they're doing it, they have no fucking chance of getting my vote. It's either that or no.
You gotta combine all these.
We've seen people hint at it, right? We saw Tulsi hint at it. We saw Donald Trump hint at it. But I want to see it all out. If it ain't all out, get the fuck out of here. Sorry. That's just my dumb guy logic behind voting. And that's the only thing that would even get me to flinch to vote.
Right.
Just saying.
And then, Snarky, all I can say to rebuttal to yours is like, well, we got representative democracy and we've had fascism, and it's a reoccurring thing throughout representative democracy. So I don't know if your argument is completely sound, but I hear it. Perks my ears up.
I don't know.
I'm just curious, like, well, then, like, when you do your, like, community advocacy, what specifically are you advocating to them? Like, because I think at one point heard someone say, like, talking about which candidates to and to not vote for, but I feel like, is that, like, a weird dynamic of being like, oh, no, none of the people right now are worth voting for, not even the third-party people, but you should be voting for the right people?
So your question
I
is
think we all got different opinions.
your
so
question.
I think we could all spend like hours.
Yeah. That the whole point of the show is exactly that question: is how are we going to include, like in when we talk to our community, like how are we going to raise consciousness to them? Like we were discussing in the earlier 2 episodes, like we can hand out some pamphlets and then we can have like a questionnaire, like which of these issues are most important to you. What should we include in these pamphlets? How will they be different? I'm talking low?
No, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah, you sound fine.
Okay, yeah. Then so, what should we include in these pamphlets? What should we prioritize? Like these are things that we discussed in the earlier episodes, and we will, discuss in the future episodes as well. And I'm looking to, assign projects to my viewers on, engage with your community, hand these out. But we want to inform people about why electoral politics is not a way forward for the reasons that some of the people here are telling you. They're privately owned and things will be sourced so that people can see, where the information comes from, and there will be recommendations on where they can get informed. But also we can go at this like for hours about, how do we best engage with our community and inform them about what's going on.
I think that's where we're all in consensus that like the best way forward is education and advocacy. And there's even instances in history of not even voting for issues and them getting pushed to being a bill or whatever, being law. So I don't know. I personally want to put my focus on that instead of elections. Like I said, it's like one day. It takes one day to read someone's platform and vote, and it to me it's literally just symbolic, because there's so many arguments I could make to why Canada's system is so corrupt that your vote doesn't count, and I could go into even more about America.
Mm-hmm.
So
I go woo-woo all day.
Dr. Woo-woo.
Follow your bliss, and you will, like, I do what I feel like doing, and happen to attract PhDs, master degrees, no college, no homes, young, old, on and so forth. All these different people, north, south, east coast, west coast, religious, non-religious, atheists, agnostic, philosophers, shit talkers, hackers, gamers, on and so forth. Doncopters. I don't know. I think
self-promoting yourself here.
No, I'm just saying.
No, yeah, I know I feel you. Yeah, but you're saying that what you advocate for is really relatable to all walks of life, right?
Well, you're just being yourself, and then who you attract is who you attract.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not gonna throw baseballs with my name on. Like, subscribe to Yellow Bro and just hit people with them and shit. Like, obviously you can do some fucking like advertising and stuff. Like, I don't mind that. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like the most you can do, the best you can possibly do, is be yourself. So if that means making pamphlets, if that means going out protesting, if that means starting an organization, if that means walking away from an organization, if that means staying home and fucking in a fucking dark corner studying conspiracy theories, do that. Follow your fucking bliss. That's my woo-woo answer.
Yeah, so we're like past the 2-hour mark
I love
here.
Batman. You gotta love Batman too.
Yeah, yeah. It's, like these escapisms, you know, they're fine. Like if you enjoy watching movies and all, there's nothing wrong with that.
Franco, that is not escapism. That is not escapism.
There's life lessons there, but you know what I mean. Like you're traveling into, you know, another world that like you're putting yourself in that world that's in that movie. But yeah, we're at the 2-hour mark here. I do, you know, gotta go to sleep. It's my bedtime. But does anyone have any final words to say before we close off here?
Batman's
I just
awesome.
want to say hi to everybody.
Sorry.
Hello.
I was just saying hi to everybody.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
thought this was super productive.
What's up, Marcus?
Franco, and yeah, maybe we could touch on it more. Maybe find more like short videos explaining some like scientific things, and then maybe some philosophical ideas. And
Yeah. This goes out to everybody who's watching. Like, if you have any recommendations of things you want me to show, like in these Thursday solution panels, I can show them and we can analyze them, just like what we did with the Gabor Mate clip earlier. But yeah, Prop or anybody, like if you guys want to send me videos that we can show here that it can explain things like concepts really well, I'll show them. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys so much. This is something that we can't just like have like one conversation about it. This is something we're gonna have to discuss for a long time. That's why I try to do this every week. So guys, thank you guys so much for coming on and discussing. I love this conversation, and everybody else stay informed.